Welcome to English Stories with Dr. K.
From Crayons to Chemo, He's Back by Her Side by Tammy Lagorce. James Garish is no spelling bee champ, but he never forgot the tricky string of letters that add up to the last name of his kindergarten crush, Elizabeth Stipkovitz. He also never forgot the girl behind the name, which is why he typed it into his laptop one lonely night in 2010 while serving in the army in Iraq. I was just sitting there in my bunk, and I started wondering how life had turned out for her, said Mr. Garish, 34. McKeesport, Pennsylvania, the working-class city where he and Miss Stipkovitz grew up, wasn't always reminiscent of picnics and parades for Mr. Garish. He dropped out of school at 14 and spent more than half a decade in dead-end jobs before enlisting in the Army in 2008. Still, he wasn't immune to homesickness. So upon finding Ms. Stipkovitz's profile on Facebook, he sent a friend request. Ms. Stipkovitz, half a world away, raising her 6-year-old daughter, Melina, had no idea who he was. I saw the request, and his name sounded familiar. But I couldn't place it, she said. She called her mother, Joyce Stipkovitz, who did recall a James Garish. She told me I was in kindergarten with him. Then I remembered, Miss Stipkovitz said. He was little bad Johnny, the class clown, the holy terror, the one always getting yelled at by the teacher. That the one-time 5-year-old handful remembered her and her hard-to-spell name stopped her in her tracks. I thought that said a lot. The relationship that is unspooled since that 2010 friend request has bound together Mr. Garish and Miss Stipkovitz in a foxhole of determination, love, and brokenness. In 2014, when she was 31, Miss Stipkovitz received her first breast cancer diagnosis. Since then, the cancer has returned twice and metastasized. At the end of 2017, she was being treated for cancer in her femur and lung. In January, it had spread to her brain. Little bad Jimmy, now a supervisor at a McKeesport Rite Aid, has never left her side. We tell people I was his rock when he was in Iraq, and he's been my rock through the crazy roller coaster ride of the last 4 years, said Miss Stipkovitz, 34. Chemo has taken a lot of my memory, but he always reminds me he's been in love with me since kindergarten. Mr. Garish had only 6 months left in his 3 years of active duty when he and Miss Stipkovitz reunited through Facebook. Within weeks, they were phone friends, then long-distance girlfriend and boyfriend. Her calls brought relief from his high-stakes job as an escort for explosive disposal specialists, the military experts who get rid of explosive weapons. We would go out on up to 7 missions a day. Things get a little crazy over there. It was stressful and I was sleep deprived. One of the things I looked forward to most was talking on the phone with Liz, says Mr. Garish, who was at the 3rd Infantry Division base at Fort Stewart, Georgia. Miss Stipkovitz remembers conversations cut painfully short because of poor reception and the swell of anticipation mixed with compassion and admiration that would kick in when a call from Iraq reached her in McKeesport. My dad served in Kuwait, and he is a retired chief in the Navy, she said. I knew how Jim felt being away from his friends and family, and that sometimes you just really need someone to vent to. She was delighted to be his someone. When Mr. Garish impulsively bought a plane ticket home for Christmas in 2010, she was even more delighted by the surprise of him on her front porch. It was dark out, and he pulled me close, and it felt good, Miss Stipkovitz said. We hadn't seen each other in a lot of years. Mr. Garish and Miss Stipkovitz had attended the same schools until 8th grade, shortly before he dropped out. but beyond kindergarten, their classes and social circles never overlapped. "We didn't miss a beat," she said. She hadn't expected such a smooth in-person reunion, not because she didn't expect the former unruly schoolboy to be so thoroughly rehabilitated, but because she wasn't sure how her life as a single mother would look to Mr. Garish from up close. Miss Dibkovitz had never been married and had Melina at 19. By the following summer, when Mr. Garish completed his service and moved back to McKeesport, he was weaving Melina into his life and vice versa. Just as she didn't expect Mr. Garish to be sympathetic to her single-parent status, she didn't expect her daughter to fall for the soft-spoken, strange soldier. Stopping here. Okay. Starting from the paragraph again. By the following summer, when Mr. Garish completed his service and moved back to McKeesport, he was weaving Melina into his life, and vice versa. Just as she didn't expect Mr. Garish to be sympathetic to her single-parent status, she didn't expect her daughter to fall for the soft-spoken strange soldier whose personality had done a U-turn in the 22 years that had passed since kindergarten. But her daughter did. Mr. Garish spent most of that summer at Miss Dibkovitz's house coloring and playing games with Melina, while Miss Dibkovitz, then still healthy, worked 9 to 5 as a medical receptionist. Reintegration to civilian life, Mr. Garish was finding, was a process. It was taking a while. One of the things I noticed was I was really tense, he said. The neighborhood I lived in wasn't the safest, and I had to give myself time to readjust to the point where I could be in groups of people and not freak out. Long afternoons spent with Melina helped. She's got her mama's attitude. She's a tough little kid. Mr. Garish had never been married and had no children, but he had previously shown an inclination, maybe fueled by his own difficult school days, to care for them. Before he reunited with Miss Dibkovitz in 2010, he donated much of his first Army paycheck, around $600, to Jamie's Dream Team, a local charity. The money helped a 6-year-old boy suffering from the genetic disorder Marfan syndrome go on a long-wished-for camping trip. He had nearly forgotten about Jamie's Dream Team 7 years later when the charity offered to throw him and Miss Dibkovitz a wedding. In the whirl of surgeries, chemotherapy, and radiation that had become his life with Miss Dibkovitz since they discovered her cancer in 2014, planning a wedding seemed as ridiculous as Miss Dibkovitz's reaction when he proposed on August 20, 2017. On that day, Miss Dibkovitz, who had a heart condition, a side effect of the cancer treatment, was being fitted with a vest which acts as a portable defibrillator at UPMC Shadyside Hospital in Pittsburgh. Mr. Garish, sitting on her bedside, was moved in the moment to ask a question of the heart. He said, "I think we deserve something good to happen. Will you marry me?" Miss Dibkovitz said, he had no ring and only part-time work at a local Rite Aid. He had, though, a high school equivalency diploma, and the GI Bill had helped him get into Penn State, where he graduated with a degree in business in 2015. He spends most of his time caring for Miss Dibkovitz and Melina, now 14. She laughed. "It was just so funny," she said. "I was in a hospital bed dying. I looked at him and he said, 'You just want the insurance money.'" But behind the laughter was elation. "I had the very same wish every little girl does of a fairy tale wedding, the crystals and the Cinderella ball gown. And I always told myself that if I found someone who bonded with my daughter in the manner he did, I would marry him. Watching the two of them interact and the way he'd struck by me, I would be a fool not to marry him, she said yes. Reading that part over again. But by the laughter, reading it over, but behind the laughter was elation. I had the same wish every little girl does of a fairy tale wedding, the crystals and the Cinderella ball gown. And I always told myself that if I found someone who bonded with my daughter in the manner he did, I would marry him. Watching the two of them interact and the way he stuck by me, I would be a fool not to marry him. She said yes. The fairy tale fantasy, complete with crystal ball gown, though, was far out of reach. Not only were the hospital stays adding up, so were the hospital bills. Miss Stipkovitz and Melina are being supported by family and Mr. Garish. She has long been too sick to work, but there are those around McKeesport who believe in making dreams come true. Liz is an amazing young woman. She's always optimistic, and she's been fighting a long time now, said Lori McCown, an oncology social worker at the hospital. Doctors have not told Miss Stipkovitz how long she can expect to keep fighting. But time is of the essence, and I wanted to do something. Miss McCown said, in late 2017, she started contacting charities. It was a snowy day, and I was sitting at my desk looking out the window. I thought, this couple wants to get married, and they're putting their plans off because of her illness, she said. A colleague told her about Jamie's Dream Team. Little did I know her fiancé had donated his first paycheck there, she said. Jamie Holmes, the founder of Jamie's Dream Team, hadn't forgotten Mr. Garish. I was like, absolutely we're going to put on a wedding for them, she said. On February 17th, only 2 months after Jamie's Dream Team rallied more than a dozen Pittsburgh area vendors to supply things like flowers, a wedding cake, and a photo booth, Mr. Garish and Miss Stipkovitz were married before 200 guests at Old Stone Church in Montville, Pennsylvania. Miss Stipkovitz, flanked by 4 bridesmaids and Melina, her maid of honor, wore a full-length white dress sewn with Swarovski crystals provided by the exquisite bride in Mauryville, Pennsylvania. Her hair, full despite several years of on and off chemotherapy, was swept into a side ponytail. Her father, Joe Stipkovitz, walked her down the aisle. Mr. Garish, in a black tuxedo with blue vest instead of his army uniform, still wore a buzz cut. Captain Tracy Lostano, an army chaplain from Assenpil, Pennsylvania, was secured by Jamie's Dream Team to officiate. After a short ceremony, punctuated by pauses so Miss Stipkovitz, who is currently on dialysis, could catch her breath and dab at relentless tears, Miss Stipkovitz and Mr. Garish joined their friends and families for a reception at the Cathedral Room at St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church in Pittsburgh. Guests who feasted on fried chicken, baked ziti, and macaroni and cheese provided by area restaurants didn't seem worried when Miss Stipkovitz fell after Mr. Garish playfully pushed a piece of red velvet cake, iced in pink, toward his new wife's face. She quickly got up. As her father, Joe Stipkovitz, said, "This is the most energetic I've seen her in quite some time. We've had more trials and tribulations than most married couples have in a lifetime," Miss Stipkovitz said just before the wedding. "I told Jim, when we say our vows, the only thing we'll have left to accomplish is, till death do us apart." Her daughter Melina, who has been present for all the worries, described her new stepfather succinctly. He makes her happy, and he's a good dude. A DJ provided by Jamie's Dream Team played Because You Loved Me by Celine Dion for the first dance. A particular lyric: you were my strength when I was weak. You were my voice when I couldn't speak. Had several onlookers in tears while Miss Stipkovitz and Mr. Garish held each other. Epilogue. On April 16th, 2 months after her dream wedding, Liz Garish died of stage 4 metastatic brain cancer.
Please subscribe, like, and share.